清大的身体，为此发挥一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱死离苦得乐，速证无生。Will the sun go with great virtue out of compassion for the sake of this assembly and all living beings? Please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to leave suffering, attain bliss, and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth. 那么萨旦陀斯切多耶阿拉哈帝三藐三菩提舍。南无萨旦陀斯切多耶阿拉哈帝三藐三菩提舍。南无萨旦陀斯切多耶阿拉哈帝三藐三菩提舍。南无萨旦陀斯切多耶阿拉哈帝三藐三菩提舍。南无萨旦陀斯切多耶阿拉哈帝三藐三菩提舍。南无萨旦陀斯切多耶阿拉哈帝。Homage to the Shurangama, Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. 南无楞严会上佛菩萨。南无楞严会上佛菩萨。It's not on my screen. Well, we decided to start. 诸佛菩萨、师父上人、法师们及各位居士，大家阿弥陀佛。阿弥陀佛。我们很高兴就是来到这边，能够就是有机会跟大家结法缘。那今天我们选择就是想要讲这个楞严咒的第3会的这个16句，因为这个16句是非常重要的，在这个楞严咒的500多句里面是非常重要的这一段。So tonight we're going to take a section beginning of the 3rd assembly of the Shurangama mantra, and we're going to explain the first 16 lines because in this particular section there are some very important things. 那在这个500多句里面，这16句是很特别，就是它等于这16句里可以除一切灾难，就是你想得到那些灾难，在这16句里面都包含了。So one of the reasons it's so important is because this talks about certain kinds of disasters, which really are generic and they cover all kinds of disasters. And so it talks about them, and also that the lines can help avert them. 那上人在解释这个楞严咒的时候，他用了8年的时间把500多句楞严咒给解释完。他在讲这个楞严咒的时候，他也特别提到，他说这个楞严咒500多句里面有包含了30几个法。那我想这16句里面就是等于就是一个很重要的法。So when the masters explained the Shurangama mantra, he said that within the large mantra there were more than 30 sections that were like smaller mantras, and I believe that this section is probably included as one of those. 那个上人刚刚这个买那个万佛城的时候，
那时候他就要求那个弟子们，就是有一段时间，就是每天在持诵这个16句。
And when we were about to go to during that time, the master especially had us recite the 16 lines to help with that process. You want me to move?
Yeah. Okay. 那这是第二个。这个16句就是。
Wait a minute. No, let me see. I'm sorry. This is the next one. I'm sorry.
那上人说，我们在这个念这个楞严咒，就是说，我们不是说，你今天想到念一次，然后你就很久想到再念。就像这个，他说上人说，功不是一下子就做成的，要一点一点的累积。虽然善事很小，你做了它一点一点也就多了。你做1次、2次就多一点，3次就大了。所以要积功德分，要常常做好事，帮助别人。
So the master said that it isn't the case that you know this takes care of disasters, so when some crisis comes up, you recite it once. The effectiveness comes from continually having it and chanting it more often, because you build up an affinity with it and the merit of it builds up. So then if you do it on a regular basis when there isn't a crisis, then when there is a crisis, and you do it, it will be effective.
那你看我们现在整个在世界上的一个国家，其实都很多天灾，很多灾难。像最近啊，美国那个那边的那个飓风，很多地方都有灾难。那你如果平常不很认真，就是不用一种真心去修这个法，基本现在就没有灾难当想到印象。你可能隔了几个月以后才想说啊，现在哪边有灾难在念。那这样的话，就是说你这个功德没办法累积，因为功德也是要靠累积的，就是每天的这样修习去累积。
Okay, you translate yourself. I was busy with the microphone. What did you say?
就是你刚刚讲那个。
Oh, I thought I was translating you.
所以现在就是说，如果你现在我们想要帮助这个世界，就是念楞严咒是非常重要的。因为等一下，如果你看了这个16句，你看到每一句都除那些灾难，你就会觉得，其实我们也可以。我们虽然不是很有力量，但是我们可以靠着诵楞严咒，我们也可以帮助这个世界。
So we don't need to think lightly on ourselves. Each person who actually puts some time into practicing any Dharma, and especially the mantra here, then you don't need to think, well, it's only me, and so I'm not going to make a difference, because in fact everybody does make a difference. So you can contribute to helping the world be free of disasters by your practice.
对，那我们现在就从这个16句，就是第3会的第1句，我们开始看一下。
I have to go all the way back. You want to say that one?
Yeah. Same?
Yeah. Finished? You want to say what they are? No?
OK， 这个16句的这个第1句就是让色佛业。那我们在解释楞严咒的时候，我们会喜欢用上人的偈颂，因为上人用这个4句偈颂是把这些咒全部的意思都解释得很清楚。你只要看上人这个偈颂，你就可以非常清楚的了解这个偈颂的意思，这个咒的意思。
So we're going to explain it line by line now. And we like to use the master's verses. He wrote verses for practically every line of the mantra, and put in it both the functions and the meanings of each line. So we'll first look at the verse.
所以我们可以一起念这个上人这个偈颂。 除灭
一切亡难苦，救助所有众苦毒，虽胜行上能离乐，可谓消灾真慧福。Eliminating suffering for those in difficulty with the law, rescuing and aiding those who are alone or orphaned, the Most Supreme Honored One brings benefit and joy by dispelling fears and increasing wisdom and blessings.
那你现在看到上面就是除灭一切亡难苦，就是拉舍婆耶它的最主要的作用就是除这个亡难的苦。那亡难苦的苦就是意思就是说有这个关难，就是国家你有犯了罪，你可能要被抓去关，那个叫做亡难。
So this refers to if you have if you're framed, if you're arrested and framed for something you didn't do, and you're put in jail. Oh, I'm sorry. We can go to Shurfa's commentary.
那这个亡难就是说，他说国王如果想要加罪到你身上，给你灾难，你可以出去。但是这个亡难是被冤枉的。如果你是真正有犯罪，那当然你不能说我明明是我杀了人，然后我赶快去念这句咒，我就可以出难，那是不可能的。
So of course this is if you are not guilty of the crime. If you actually did it, then you can't recite the mantra and figure you can get out of it. This is if you were framed.
所以这句除亡难苦，就是说，如果你被冤枉了，你可以念这个咒，然后免除这个灾难。
So if you were framed, if it's a mistaken identity, and you're actually then in trouble with the law, you can use this line to help yourself.
那这个可谓消灾真慧福的意思就是说，因为这些护法菩萨都具足威德，有威可畏，有德可敬，让你一见到他就生恭敬心，又能够消灾，又能够增福，又能够开智慧。因为
Okay, so one of the lines talks about this one of the lines talks about this particular line of mantra being able to inspire awe and eradicate disasters and augment wisdom and blessings.
那在这个，因为如果你有机会去研读这个楞严经里面，你就可以知道，在楞严经里面提到，所有如果你修习这个楞严法门，修习楞严经、楞严咒，都有84000金刚藏菩萨随时在你的身边保护你。那所以这个就是为什么能够可谓消灾，因为这些金刚护法菩萨这些来保护我们。
So, in a general study of the mantra, you learn that there are Dharma protecting spirits. They're called Vajra spirits, and there are 84,000 of them connected with this mantra. And so by reciting it, you bring them, and they come and are protective of you, of anyone who recites the mantra.
那在地藏经里面提到说，缘菩提众生举心动念，无不是业，无不是罪。菩萨昼夜不如休息的来教化我们，那我们总是不听话。所以就是说，如果但是他在这边提到这里，就是说，你如果真的去犯罪，那菩萨他也不会说，因为你犯罪，你赶快去念这句楞严咒，没有办法帮你去免除这个罪。是讲到是你做的事，你没有去做这个，没有犯这个罪，被冤枉了。
So we learn in the Arastor Sutra that basically everything we think and everything we do is potentially a mistake or brings about karma. And so if in fact you really did this crime, then that is karma that you're going to have to deserve to receive some sort of effect for. Only if you didn't does this line of mantra help.
像我们现在在娑婆世界，很多人就觉得很多的苦，就是不管是 什么样的苦，每个人受的苦是不同的。那为什么会有这么多的苦呢？上人在解释的时候，他就说，这是因为我们在往昔，就是我们的善根不够，所以你现在等于你在受这个报，你就有很多的那些逆境生出来，像有很多不如意的事情啊，那这个都是一种很多种考验，任何时候都是一种考验。
So in this world, we go through a lot of suffering. A lot of things happen to us. And we often wonder why. I'm a good person. Why does this bad thing happen? Or somebody else is a bad person. Why do good things happen to him? It has to do with receiving a reward or a retribution for something we've done in the past. And so if we receive a lot of negative things coming to us, it may well be because we haven't done a lot of good in the past. So in order to try to correct that in this life, we should try to plant good roots. In other words, we should do good deeds, try to help other people, even though our own situation may be difficult.
所以现在我们在受这种火爆，就是说像现在世界各地有很多的灾难，然后那是天灾当然有很多人祸，还有包括我们自己本身的一些灾难。那这个都是一种等于是让你回光返照的时候。你在面临这种逆境的时候，你应该回光返照，就是看看自己，去想一想，我是不是有哪些事情做得不好？我是不是有哪些地方做错了？所以这个是一种回光返照的时候，让你看看自己。
So these things happen, and it's hard to understand why. It's hard to understand why I have to go through this, or somebody I like, or somebody who's good has to go through something. In Buddhism, we realize that probably it has to do with what we did before. So now karma says what we did before brings us to what's happening now. We can know what we were before by what's happening now, and we can know what we do now is going to affect what happens in the future. That's the way Buddhism looks at it. It's not like somebody else put it on us or gave it to us. And so we have to think about this karma I did, these deeds I did, so how do I deal with that? And we have to be a bit philosophical. We have to realize, maybe I deserve this. Maybe this is something that I need to go through. Maybe I'll learn something from this. Okay, this is the second line. So I will, you can read the Chinese which info first, and then I'll explain.
第二句就是主腊华业，这个偈颂是此咒除灭贼寇难，
言而必摄甚一转，善使佛那
佛诵布，
世尊教法。So this, what we're doing is we're explaining a line of mantra, and we're explaining 16 of them tonight. And this is the second line, so it's Jula Baya. And the verse is about the line. The verse tells two things. It tells the function, what the line can do. It also tells meanings. So this line says, this mantra quells difficulties with thieves and plunderers, and ties up eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The superior master of the many divisions is Vairocana Buddha. The Dharma taught by the world-honored one should be studied. So she's going to explain in Chinese. I'm going to explain in English. Sometimes I'll translate her. Sometimes she'll translate me. Sometimes we'll say something entirely different. So if you're bilingual, you'll get it all. Huh?
那主腊华业在这个内言咒里面讲的是说除贼寇难，但是上人在解释的时候，他说你不要只注意到这个贼寇，只注意到外面的贼，其实最重要的是我们里面的贼。那外面的贼你很容易抓得到，因为小偷进来，你看到小偷，那你知道他是外面的贼。但是我们里面的贼，你知道在哪里吗？是在我们的眼耳鼻舌身意，其实都是我们的贼。
Okay, so the line, I'll go back to, so you can see the English. The first line talks about thieves that might come into our house or into our car, or in other words, not ourselves, but somebody else who comes to steal our things. But the second line talks about how we even steal our own energy. from ourselves. And that's because if we're not careful with what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, we use a lot of energy. And so they become what's called our inner thieves. That is, our sense organs become inner thieves if we waste our energy on them. So that's why the second line is the way it is. Oh, now you want to do Shifu?
那在内研咒里面在讲内研咒的时候，500多句里面，上人也提到说，用的法就是有5种法，有一个叫做敬爱法，有一个叫做习斋，有一个是降伏，有一个是勾造。那这一句话是属于勾造法，勾造法就好像你拿一个钩子把什么东西勾过来，那个叫勾造法。那上人曾经跟我们讲说，勾造法是很厉害的，他基本上他并不鼓励我们特别去用勾造法，因为他最好是你能够是用一种敬爱、一种习斋，是一种吉祥的、比较吉祥的方法去用。
So in studying mantras are recited for the resonance, for the sound value, but they also have functions. They can help us open our compassion, and they can help heal and do other things. And in the mantras are different functions. And this particular line is called a hooking and summoning line. And what does that mean? I remember one time the master we were in San Francisco, and he was lecturing, and he got a phone call. He used to keep the telephone right on the podium, and he'd answer the phone in the middle of the lecture. So he got a phone call from Hong Kong, and one of his disciples had been meditating deeply, and he thought he saw that he was going to become awakened. He was going to wake up. He was going to enlighten. And he had a false thought, and he thought, I'm going to be the next patriarch. And as soon as he had the thought, 3 outside thieves came to get him, and he couldn't get rid of them. And then standing, he couldn't stand. Sitting, he couldn't stand. Lying down, he was so nervous because these 3 things were bothering him. So he called the master, and he said, I'm sorry, I had a false thought. I thought I was going to become the next patriarch. And so the master said, okay. So master's in San Francisco and the disciples in Hong Kong. And so we didn't hear any more. That was all we heard. And then a few nights later, always at the end of the lecture, the master would tell a little, give us some news or tell us a story. So a few nights later, he said, you remember the guy who called from Hong Kong? Well, I used hooking and summoning. So I hooked him, and then I summoned him, and I brought him here. So I took those 3 things that were bothering my disciple, and I brought him here. And they're right there in the corner in the lecture hall, and they have to stay there and listen to the Dharma. So that's what hooking and summoning is about. Yeah, funny. 很多人听不懂。
上人曾经就是他们以前早期的时候，有一次就是在那个San Francisco，然后上人有一天在讲法的时候，刚好就是有电话来了，然后就是那时候在香港的一个弟子，他打电话给上人说，因为他自己出了一些状况，他那时候就是有一些事情很干扰他，然后呢，
他自己打一个妄想说他
觉得他要变成下一任祖师了，就是打了妄想。所以这个是上人常告诉我们说，不要乱打妄想。其实他就是因为打了妄想就出状况，我们讲就出状况。然后他那时候不晓得该怎么办呢，就赶快打电话给上人。那上人就说，好吧，那就应该要去救这个弟子了。所以这个是事后上人告诉我这些弟子们说，你们记得吗？那一天我接到一个电话，那我是用什么办法去帮助这个弟子呢？我就是用勾造法。把那个他的那些麻烦给他勾过来，因为那时候就是等于是有三个众生，然后他们现在就在
鬼，可以说鬼
，3个鬼把他抓过来，那他就让他们在那个角落听，就是在那边听法，所以那个3个鬼就在那个地方。
So that's what this line does. This line is hooking and summoning. Should we use it that way? No. We're just beginners. even those of us who've been around a long time and we know the mantra by heart, the Master always taught us you use your effort toward yourself. You don't say, okay, I'm going to get you and hook you and summon you. Not now, not at our point. We're like apprentices. You know, we haven't graduated to become a carpenter yet, so we don't try to do that. Nonetheless, it's good for us to know what the function of the line is.
那为什么上人会不鼓励我们说，我们明明知道是勾造法，他不鼓励我们用？因为你用这种勾造法的话，你的心里是起一种对待，就说好，好像我有能力，我可以对付你。你在想说我要对付人家的时候，其实就是用一种比较敌对的一种心态，对不对？你不是用一种很吉祥、很祥和的，他不鼓励我们去用，因为如果你的德恩不够，你去用这个勾造法，你就很容易给你自己带来麻烦。
Okay, so you finished with this one?
OK. 那刚刚讲到说，我们的内在就是因为我们这个六根眼耳鼻舌身意，我们很容易被这个六尘，就是外面的这些境界所转，那等于就是被你的内在偷去了。所以为什么讲说用一个拴子，就是把它拴住，不要让它跟着六尘的境界跑，要把你自己的六贼给抓住，不要让你自己跟着这个外面的境界跑。
In Buddhism, when we talk about the mind, we talk about these, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the body, as being part of the mind. So in Buddhism, the mind has 8 parts, and the first 5 are these. And that means that we have the capacity within our mind and our mental function to control these. We can have these do what we want them to do. And a lot of us don't realize that. And so we tend to follow our eyes, follow our ears. We hear something and it draws us away because we don't realize that ear is there for me to use the way I want to use, and I shouldn't have to be drawn by it to do something that I may not want to do.
那在下一句就是阿奇米佛业，这一句话在讲的就是除这个火的火难，就是那火灾那种火难。那上人的寄颂是这样讲：重送神明心火难，白蚁难防阴丙丁，救护有庆利热闹，普火新阳得明争。
Okay, so this line, the verse from the Master says, a spirit called repetitive verses, that's the name of the spirit, dispels difficulty with fire. The white-robed one in the south belongs to Bing and Ding. Those are 2 branches that represent the south. Sentient beings are rescued, so they leave heated afflictions, and all gain clear coolness and the brightness of their lamp. 所以这个是要降服火，就是要避免一个火难的时候。
上面第一句好像少了第一句。
I can't touch it because I don't know how to use this, but you just have to do what you can.
所以你现在看到说白衣南方印比例，这是因为这一句咒，它本身其实有很多的意思，不是只有除火难，它还包括它的意思有一个白衣，有个南方。那上人在做这些寄送的时候，他真的是有这个无上的智慧，他就把这些所有的意思就用4句寄送，把所有的意思全部包含了。所以当你看到这个寄送的时候，你可能刚看的时候你没有办法了解意思，为什么又南方又白衣又南方？这个因为它最重要就是把所有的意思都把你包含在里面。
Okay, so I'm going to translate her. We missed the first line. I'm not real adept at this, so we'll go to the second line. And the point is, the mantra line itself has lots of functions and lots of meanings. So its function is to avoid disasters with fire, to not get burned. But its meanings are many. So besides that, it means the south, It means Guanyin, the white-robed one. So there are many meanings in there. And when the master wrote the verses, in order to preserve those functions as well as meanings, he put them in the verse. So the first time you read the verses, they seem sometimes disjointed, because why do we have fire and south and so forth? But that's the reason. Okay.
那因为这个咒是除这个火难，那就跟刚刚一样，就是说你不要只注意到这个外面这个火，就是火灾呀、起火的这个火难，其实最重要是要去注意我们里面那个火的难，就是那个常常发火那个无明火的那个难。所以他就会讲到这个，他就说这个无明火其实是最厉害的。所谓无明火，老虎神，只是前生罪孽根。那人动不动就发脾气啊，生了嗔恨了，这都叫做无明火。上人常常讲到这个句子来告诫我们。
Yeah, so just as we had two kinds of thieves in the last one, we had the external thieves and we have the internal thieves. Here we have fire as actual fire that can burn you physically, but we also have the internal fire, which is considered to be ignorance, not understanding. And ignorance leads us to have a temper. Things don't go our way, then we get upset. And when we get upset and we get angry, then a whole lot of our energy gets burned up really fast, so that it's just like fire. And the verse says, blazing ignorance and a temper fierce as a tiger are rooted in karmic offenses created in former lives. She said, the master said this a lot. Well, he certainly said it a lot to me. I'm not the best-tempered person.
其实不是只有这个，是上人在讲法里面，在开始常常在讲说不要发脾气。我记得那时候上人去到有一次就是带了弘法团去台湾的时候，那时候就几千人的那个大家排队等着要让上人加持，因为很多人都有病啊，有各种困难这样。那因为那时候我是当义工，所以我在前面我知道。那几乎你知道几千人围在那个广场里面，哇，真是人山人海。那每一个人都要来见上人，都要加持。那都是有病啊，有什么病有什么病，都是很奇怪的，都是很深的很重的病。我听到上人在回答这些人的时候，几乎10个里面讲了9句是一样，都说不要发脾气。然后第二个过来了，还是不要发脾气。什么病，然后或者什么困难，上人给他的一个开示，他们都说请上人开示我们，请上人教化我们。上人就说不要发脾气。所以上人常常讲说，这个无明火是最厉害的，是最伤害我们的。
Okay, so for us, we have in this world, where this world is half good and half bad, you could say. It's a combination, and we are also. In the middle of all the different kinds of beings there are in the paths of rebirth, like from the gods to the titans or the warriors, the asuras, to people, to animals, to ghosts, to the hell beings, we are in the middle. So we are 50% emotion and 50% reason, potentially. And so, because we have a physical animal body, basically, that's where our emotion is. And because we're among all sentient creatures, extraordinary because we have the mental capacity to reason, then that's the other part of us. And what happens so often is we allow the emotional, the physical of our animal existence to take over, and we forget to use the reason. So we need to think about that, and especially with things like our temper. It's so easy to react physically with emotion instead of to take a step back and wait. The master, one time one of the American disciples was teaching, as Ginny has taught, he was teaching difficult kids. We used to call them juvenile delinquents. I don't know what they call them now. Kids who were having trouble adjusting in society. And they gave him a lot of trouble. So one time he asked the master, what can I do? I really want to teach these kids, but it's so hard. And he said, he gave him a mantra, and the mantra was patience, patience, gotta have patience, need to have patience, so poho. So always just wait and step back and let your reason rule you instead of your emotion rule you.
下一句是乌陀迦婆耶，那这一句出什么灾？你这样看得出吗？
you know
因为有风灾嘛，那这一句就是除风难，就是风灾的难。那上人的寄颂，这句话的原来的这个寄颂并不是上人写，但是上人就改了几个字，用了这个寄颂，因为这个寄颂在佛法里面是常常被用到，是很有名的。六欲诸天俱无衰，
三餐相与有朋哉。人群修道非非少，不如西方归去来。So this verse is classic in Buddhism. It isn't the master's verse. He just changed in the second line the third and fourth characters. That's all he changed, but he made it his own by doing that. So the verse says, the 6 desire heavens have the 5 signs of decay, and even the 3rd dhyana undergoes the wind disaster. Even if one cultivates to the heaven of neither thought nor non-thought, it's not as good as going to the Western land and coming back again. So this is a wind disaster. And in mantras, I don't know why, but most often when the line's function has to do with wind, the wu is used, that character. Don't ask me why.
那上人就解释这个四句偈颂，六欲诸天俱无衰，因为在佛法里面有讲到，就是在天界的这些天人啊，他们要命终的时候，就是天人也有他的寿命嘛，他寿命快要终了的时候，会出现5个现象。5个现象就是花冠猥亵，就是你知道那个天人常常他们头上都带着花的。那如果他的寿命还没终了的时候，任何时候他的花都是非常新鲜、非常美丽的。可是有一天，如果这个天人现出那个花凋谢了，那表示他的寿命快要终了了。
So, this is talking about the heavens in the 6th desire realm, and we are in the desire realm. That's where we live as human beings. But there are 6 heavens above us that are also in the desire realm. And we're talking about when somebody who's born into one of those heavens, because in Buddhism we talk about many gods, not just one god. Anybody who gets born in a heaven can be called a god. And it's temporary. They're only there for as long as they deserve, and then they go back into rebirth. It's not like you go to heaven forever or you go to hell forever. You go for as long as you deserve. So they go there, and these are signs. When these signs show up, then the god knows something's amiss, because normally he has fresh flowers without changing them. His clothes never get dirty. He never sweats. He's always fragrant, and he sits in samadhi. He sits in meditation. When he can't do those things anymore, when they start to go, then that's like we get old and we know, oh, these are the signs of death coming. So too, they know these are the signs of leaving the heavens coming. Oh, sorry.
然后他的这个所谓的五衰象限呢，就是花冠猥亵，然后那个衣裳着尘埃。这天人的衣服，他们天人从来不用洗衣服的，他们不用换衣服，因为他们的衣服永远都是非常干净、非常洁净的。可是这个五衰象限的时候，衣服就开始有灰尘了。然后本来天人也都不会流汗的，根本不会像我们人这样子，你必须流汗就要去换衣服的，他们不流汗的。可是，在五衰象限出来的时候，就2夜也有汗了。然后平常的天人是身上都是有香气，这个时候就有臭味了，然后不做本座。那天人其实他长时间都是打坐，他们有这个禅定，可是在那个时候他坐不住了。
Can you do anything about it? Yes, you can. Because in Buddhism we think about being able to change what's coming to us. So we think about before we do something, while we're doing it, and after we do it. So the mind before you do it, the mind while you're doing it, and the mind afterwards. And so at that point in the heavens, if the God realizes he could do something, she or he could do something that would extend his time in the heavens. He could do some good deed or some merit. It's possible to change. It's not that karma says it's fixed. You can change it with your own mind.
好，那上面就有提到了，他说这4句是现成的，我只是改了几个字，本来是三禅天上有风灾，他现在改成三禅上且有风灾，因为前面有个天，所以它就是不重复这样。
Okay, so this explains how the Chinese verse got changed by 2 characters.
那讲到那个三灾，就是我们讲的这个水灾、火灾跟风灾，就是火烧初禅、水淹二禅、风刮三禅，就是在初禅天有到初禅天要结束的时候，就有一个大火会把初禅天都整个毁灭，而二禅天就是有个大水，三禅天就是风。那在解释这个的时候啊，他讲说人间的飓风很大，就是什么时候都有可能，这个一刮风就把所有的这些房子啊、人啊都摧毁了。那这一句咒可以免除这样的一个风灾。
Yeah, so this line has to deal with disasters of wind. And so first and foremost for us, if we use that line, we could help. I mean, what just happened in New York, for instance, we could assume that our reciting that line could help that kind of disaster. What we're talking about here is that we have the 6 heavens in the desire realm. And then we have 19 heavens in the form realm. And in the form realm, those first heavens get burned up by fire when a big disaster happens. Now, what does that mean? Well, it does mean that if there are gods, if there are people undergoing a reward in the heavens, that area would be destroyed. But it also has to do with being able to go to these heavens in meditation, because these are the heavens of the dhyanas. So we can sit in the desire realm, we can sit in samadhi, and while our physical body is still in the desire realm, we can be in the form realm, which means we don't have the desire anymore while we're in samadhi. However, in samadhi, it can be destroyed by fire. And part of that's symbolic. It means we can't really get to the dhyana if we have a temper. If we lose our temper, it's going to keep us from getting there. What do you think, Maggie? You think that's right? Yeah? Did you want to say more here? You don't want to. Okay. So then the water floods into the second dhyana. That's the heaven in the form realm. But it's also where we go in samadhi. Okay? And then the third one is the one we're talking about. The wind destroys the third dhyana. So this mantra can help us, can help the gods, and can help us in samadhi.
那任君修道非非想，不如西方归去来。这意思就是说啊，其实为什么在佛法里面，我们不鼓励我们在佛法里面从来没有说，哎，你应该发愿修到天界。为什么？因为你就是修到这个非想非非想出天啊，那里的天人有84000万的寿命，84000岁。但是你就是修到这个非想非非想出天，你想了这么长的寿命，想完之后呢，怎么办？你还是要堕入，你还是要堕入这个轮回，所以不鼓励你发愿说我要升天界。所以呢，不如西方归去来，不如啊，你修这个念佛的法门，然后将来往生的时候，往生到极乐世界，那你就不会再堕入这个轮回。
Okay, so up at the top is the line of the verse that's explaining this line of mantra. And what it's talking about is this now is in the formless realm. So we're living in the triple realm: desire, form, and formless. And at the very top of the formless realm is a heaven called neither thought nor non-thought. So that's the very peak of existence for us. If we went beyond that, we would be sages. Okay? So in bringing that up, the Master is saying even if you get just to the point where you could become a sage and you can go to that heaven, it isn't as good as going to the Pure Land. All right, so she says that this heaven's lifespan is very, very long. Nonetheless, at the end of the lifespan, as I told you before, we only go to a heaven or a hell or to a human realm for as long as we deserve, and then we move on. So you get to go to the heaven for as long as you deserve, but then you move on. So even with a lifespan so long, you have to move on. Why does he say go to the Western land? It's because Amitabha Buddha, who's in the Western land, made a vow, and he said, I'd like to have a special land, and in order to have a special land, I'm going to make vows. And one of my vows is anybody who wants to come to my land can bring their karma, and in my land, they can work out their karma. They don't have to go to the heaven, go to the hell, go to the human realm. They can bring all their bag of karma and work it out in my land. So Shifu's point here is instead of following your karma through all the rebirth, you could decide you wanted to recite Amitabha Buddha's name and do other dharmas and be able to go to his land. If you went to his land, then you don't have to work out your karma in rebirth.
那下一句就是毗沙婆耶，这一句是除什么难？你这样看得出来吗
Maggie?
对，除这个毒难。那上人的寄颂是这样讲：此咒能除诸毒药，草木化学
害人者，一切所有皆平定，离苦得乐又解脱。So this is Pisha Poya. And the mantra, the verse says, this mantra can dispel poisonous drugs, as well as poison from grass and wood and chemicals that harm people. These toxins can be completely neutralized, enabling beings to leave suffering, attain bliss, and be liberated. So this line gets rid of poison. 讲你的故事啊，我们要讲那个故事吗？就是那个人呢？
哦，那讲到这个除毒难的时候，上人在讲这句的时候，他有提到一个故事，就是当年很早以前在万佛村有一个居士，那因为那时候就是好像是在万佛村很大嘛，有一个地方就长出了很多的菇，很漂亮。
Okay, this is a story about the city of 10,000 Buddhas many years ago. A visitor came. And the city's quite large. It's over 100 acres, and there's lots of landscaping and bush vegetation, and there are lots of mushrooms there.
然后这位居士就是姓萧居士，我记得。然后他当时看到这些香菇，就是蘑菇，他看着说哇这么大这么漂亮，他就赶快采了，就送到厨房说啊这样子我们可以给大家都加采。可是厨房那时候他们大家有一点概念，就是听到说他们都知道说外面很多菇是会有毒的，尤其是越漂亮的菇越有可能，所以他们说这个有毒，我们不能煮。
So this layman was out walking and he saw these beautiful mushrooms, big and soft, and so he said, what a waste. And so he picked them, took them to the kitchen, but the kitchen already knew that among the kinds of mushrooms that grow in the area of the city of 10,000 Buddhas are those that are poisonous. So they didn't want to cook them.
那结果这个萧居士大概真的生性非常的节俭，他说哇这么多的菇不给他煮不是很可惜吗？结果他就自己去煮，煮了以后他就吃掉。 结果那一天的半夜，哇，就有人发现了，他整个人都已经变黑了，然后赶快给他送到医院。
So he was, you could say, thrifty, and he decided, I picked these mushrooms and they won't cook them, I'll cook them myself. He did, he ate them himself, and then within a few hours he was black. So they took him to the hospital, sorry.
送到医院之后，就有人赶快跑去找上人说，这位就是中毒在医院的。
So as soon as he was sent to the hospital then, because he is actually physically was turning black, so then they told the master, we've sent him emergency to the hospital.
然后为什么那时候医院已经跟他们讲说这个没有救了，因为全身都发黑了，叫他们准备后事。哇，他们大家都很紧张，所以赶快去找上人。
So the hospital said there's no hope because it was kidney failure, among other things, and so his body was turning dark, and they said we don't have a way to save him. So then people were really nervous and they contacted Shifu, the master.
然后上人听了以后，就后来就进了他的房间，他说他可以救他，就进了他的房间。然后后来有法师就回忆这件事情，就是等到隔天上人出来的时候，上人整个人脸色是苍白的，看起来非常的虚弱，但是这个居士救活了。
So the master said, went in to be near the layman in the hospital and said, I can handle it, and stayed the night. And then the next morning when he came out, he was pale. Obviously he'd worked hard, but the layman lived.
那这个是上人很久以前才告诉大家的，那个萧居士那个命，他就是用内眼咒把他救回来的。
So it was much later that the master then explained that he had recited the Shurangama mantra in order to save the guy from dying.
那下一句是舍萨多那婆耶。那这一句话，你看到刀锋，就是除这个刀难。这个刀难不是我们讲的，就是用这个刀，是我们讲刀兵劫，就是那个战争的难。
So this one, what it resolves is war, and so it talks about knives, but it basically means war.
所以这个偈颂是善利
众生金刚神，辩才无碍系道风，
丑谢枷锁均解脱。
The verse says the Vajra spirits, and that's what the picture is of a Vajra spirit. Remember, we said there were 84,000 Vajra spirits that protect this mantra. The Vajra spirits are well able to benefit beings. Their unobstructed eloquence can put to rest knife blades, stocks, bonds, handcuffs, and chains are released and opened up. Disasters are quelled, difficulties avoided, and disputes resolved and ended. So that's the function of the line. And you notice in the second line it says eloquence is what does it. So we're talking about diplomacy. We're talking about let's get together and talk about why we're going to have this war and see if we can resolve it. And that's what they did.
那你在这个偈颂里面就有看到有金刚神啊，有辩才无碍啊，然后有习刀锋啊，都是这一句咒的意思，就是它也是一个金刚神的名字，那它也有辩才无碍的意思在里面。那在下一句就是婆那作杰那婆耶，它的意思上面那个刀是习刀锋，就是那个刀啊，就是那种杀伤啊，那种伤害。那在这一句话的话，婆那作杰那婆耶就是指这个战争，就是习这个刀兵劫，这个战争的劫。
So the above, it talks about knives, also talking about diplomacy and stopping a conflict, and this one talks about all-out war.
那它的偈颂是论义做法转。
慢一点。论义做法转苗轮，金刚大将系战锋，军纪清醒干戈止。
冰冷结响庆生平。
Discussions and doing Dharma turn the wonderful Dharma wheel. That talks about having meetings, again, about diplomacy, about trying to work things out another way. The Vajra great generals appease the warlike atmosphere. Troops obey orders and armed conflicts are stopped. Weapons and armor are thrown off and celebrations of peace ensue. So both these lines work together, and they're talking about using reason over emotion. In other words, finding a way to resolve the conflict without war.
所以你在这个寄送里面看到有锐意，这个也就是它其中一个意思。那金刚大将也是它其中一个名言，然后习战分就是这个刀兵之节。
So discussions in doing Dharma is one function or meaning of this line. And then the great generals also have contribute to the meaning of this line. And then being able to stop war is the function of the line.
那这个寄送是上人常常讲的，就是他常常用这句寄送来讲的我们这个。说这个世界上为什么有这些刀兵者，就是有这些战争呢？其实跟这个我们千百年来的这种杀业有关系。那这个寄送是这样讲的，我们可以一起念：
千百年来黄一根，冤亲四害很难平。欲治时上刀兵劫，须听书门月半生。So this is the source of war, according to the master. It says, for hundreds of thousands of years, the soup in our bowls creates sea-deep resentment, impossible to make right. If you want to know why this world has wars, listen to the slaughterhouse cries that pierce the night. So he says there's a direct relationship between our killing each other, including all sentient beings, not just people killing people, but sentient beings killing each other, and war, because of the resentment that builds up.
所以，像我们现在知道，这个世界上有很多的战争，你常常会觉得为什么有战争？不只是国跟国之间的战争，在一个国家里面很多的内战，那种战争，那为什么？原因出在哪里？就是跟这个我们千百年来我们这种杀业，就是我们为了这个我们这个口腹之欲的这个杀业，其实这个杀业，你杀一只动物，然后你领下的这些杀业的这个果报，将来就会变成这个我们现在所看到的这种战争。所以其实你在探究这个原因，你现在只看到说我跟国家的战争，或者是国内里面的那个战争，你以为这个可能是他们的宗教的问题，他们什么问题？其实往远的来看，其实都跟我们这个杀业有关系的。
So the way Buddhism looks at things is we're not just one life. It's not from conception to death. The way Buddhism looks at things, there have been many lives and there will be many more. Did you know that, Maggie? This is your only life. Yeah. So because of that, then we have to be careful with all kinds of interactions with sentient beings. The Master talks about our karma, and that actually from life to life we have affinities. We know each other. I mean, tonight we don't know each other, but maybe because before we did, we're back together again. And so he says in the neighborhood you may have somebody's ox, and you may have somebody's kid, and you may have the maidservant and so forth, and they trade places. So maybe the ox had been somebody's mother, or the little kid had been somebody's father before, or the maid had maybe been the ox. So that means we need to be careful with the kinds of creatures that we come up against, because, and again, you're just entertaining what Buddhism sees, which is many lives. I'm not asking you to believe that particularly, but at least you can know that that's the way Buddhism is.
那下一句就是涂色超佛业，那这一句就在这个句颂里面看到，就除这个经济难，就是像有些国家啊，他们会有饥荒，大家都没有饭吃，这个就是因为你有这个经济难，你这个命运里面你遭遇了这样的难，那如果你能够有一直在持诵这个内容中，你根本不会有遭遇这种经济难的这种可能。
Okay, so this line talks about starvation, talks about famine and hunger. And if we understand karma, then we realize what happened before is making now happen. But we also can realize what happens now will come back to us in the future. And so it's possible for us to avoid planting the kinds of causes that would make us have to undergo famine and suffering.
这个计算是这样：人持宪法离苦厄，
除己经难得解脱，守护金刚为成义，贫穷后美悉复活。Those who can hold precepts will separate from suffering and hardship. They will be freed from the difficulty of hunger and famine and will obtain liberation. The Vajranites who guard and protect them have awesome spiritual might. Those who are dying of destitution or freezing or starving to death will all be able to come back to life. So this is famine. You want to talk about famine? Yeah. The master in the Shurangama talked about famine because he saw it in mainland China. And when there was a drought in the north, and so people began to go south, just walking on the roads. And he said that later what was going on. He was sitting by his mother's grave, so he wasn't walking on the roads. But later when he went south to Canton province, he met a man who had gotten through the famine and gotten down there. And so the man talked to him about what happened on the road. And one of the things the man said is that when you die of starvation, you die laughing. Did you know that? So the people who were starving and no longer could walk lay on the sides of the roads and laughed, and that's how they died. But the other thing he said was they were trying to leave famine because there was no water, because there was a drought. But it obviously was their karma too, because on the way there was a locust plague. Locusts are little bugs, creatures that come in and they can devour a whole field of the greens of, say, a cornfield. They can take off all the corn and they can take off all the leaves. Locusts are like that. They come in a huge swarm, they're almost like a black cloud, and they come down and they eat everything. So on top of having no water, and having to walk the roads to try to go south so they could eat, along the way came the locust plague, and so anything that was available to eat got eaten by the locusts. So what's the obvious thing to do? Eat the locusts, right? So they gathered up the locusts and put the locusts, and they cooked them, and when they cooked them, they turned to human excrement. They turned to shit right in the pan, and nobody wants to eat that. So those people died, and it looks like one disaster on top of another finally brought them to death. That's apparently a true story because the master got it from a man who managed to get through it.
上人曾经讲到这个灾难，他在讲这个故事的时候，我们大家都印象都很清楚。就是那个时候，就是因为中国那个应该就是跟日本的那时候的灾难的时候，很多地方都饥荒。 很多地方。那最重要就是曾经有一年就是有蝗虫的灾害。那时候呢，蝗虫就是把所有经过的地方，我们听那个故事，我是没有见过啦，就是蝗虫的灾难，就是蝗虫所过，我们叫它蝗虫过进去，全部都一干二净嘛。你不管你树根、树干什么，它能咬的全部吃光光。那时候人因为没有东西吃，他们大家就想，那干脆我们既然这么多蝗虫，我们来吃蝗虫好了。他们就把那个蝗虫抓下来以后去煮，结果煮完之后全部都是变成大便，根本就不能吃，所以到这个人还是饿死。那我记得那个故事就是，他们当时就是说，曾经有人看到，就是天上有人，就是一直就往这个地上到那个就是黑黑的东西，那就是蝗虫，把整个全部做就是人经过。
那是谁？是 God 吗？
所有人，所以这个机警为什么你会有机警呢？就是因为当然是跟我们的这个业报有关系。但是如果说你能够一直有这个持诵那严重，你可以免除这样的灾难。那下一句是阿舍尼佛也，这一句讲的就是除这个雷电难，你可以看到。那寄诵就是无有障碍空神明，灭除雷电不畏行，对逆小云相灾难，大火丁手能者。
Without obstruction is the name of spirit of emptiness. He gets rid of the horrifying effects of thunder and lightning. Shastras, discussions, teachings, and explanations dispel disasters, such as the writings of the great Buddha Summit, the foremost Shurangama Sutra.
那在那个寄诵里面，你看到无有障碍、空神明，都是这个阿舍尼佛也的意思。它有一个意思是无有障碍，有一个意思是空神，空神就是空神的名字，虚空神这个名字。啊，它最重要就是除这个雷电难。
Go ahead.
那下一句是阿迦那啊，你看他这个寄诵，恨死非命太悲伤，入海空难不胜防，最上拈手除灾障，金刚大将度十方。
So this line is Ajala, unexpected and accidental deaths cause too much grief and sorrow. Crises on land, on seas, and in the air are so numerous they're hard to avoid. Most superior recitation eradicates disasters and obstacles. The great Vajra generals can save people throughout the world.
那你看这个预奏，你大概可以看得到，它这个阿迦那就是除这个恨死难，恨死就是无意中的，你根本没有办法预期的，那突然之间的这种灾难。
So we talk about accidental death, but we also talk about karma. So then the question is an accidental death karma? If it is, why is it called accidental? Well, in fact, yes. Sometimes something happens outside of our karmic bag, and we would call that accidental. When something accidental happens, very often the soul can't be freed. In other words, suppose there's an accident on the road, someone dies. That soul, because it's unexpected and out of the karmic pattern for that person, they can't go to rebirth. They're stuck. And so, I don't know about here, but back in the United States, some of the states in the United States, they'll put a cross on the road wherever there was a fatal accident. And sometimes there's lots of crosses there. Now, why is that? Why would one accident happen on top of another? Because that spirit can't get free until it has another soul. So it causes that accident, and then it gets free, but then the next soul isn't free. So yes, sometimes unexpected can be outside of our normal karmic pattern.
那下一句是密力住佛业，那这个寄颂就是未曾有法妙难言，一切意外悉安全，金甲天神莫护佑，赏善罚恶爱不偏。
Okay, so this one is Mili Jupoya, and it says, Dharma that's never been before is wonderful beyond words. It brings safety so that accidents just don't happen. The golden armored celestial spirits protect and aid in silence. They reward good and punish evil. I do kin, and they're unprejudiced in doing so.
那这句话的意思就是，又未曾有法，也是他的一种意思，然后也是金甲天神的名字的一个意思。
Okay, so in this kind of a spirit, may be part of what happens when we have to undergo a retribution. In other words, it's time for us to receive some sort of reward for what we did before, or some sort of retribution or punishment for what we did before. But in order for that karmic scenario to happen, somebody has to make it happen, right? So very often, God, the Christian God, and the Dharma protectors of Buddhism will create the scenario in which you're going to receive your reward or your retribution. They set it up. It's not that they are judging. It's not that they are punishing. All they're doing is helping the thing happen. It's we who caused it, and so it's we who undergo the retribution. It's not that anybody else says, you did that wrong, we're going to punish you. It's that because the karma wasn't right, we get punished. We did it to ourselves.
我们常常讲说，什么头上三尺有神明，这句话感觉好像不是佛法里面讲的，所以我们一般就是好像常常听到这样的话。但事实上，在佛法里面也是有这样的道理，就是说，在天神，他们有很多不同的天神，他有不同的责任，有不同的工作，有些是专门就是每天他在记录你的作为，你的好啊、坏呀、好事坏事做多少。有些是可能是半个月才记录一次，有些人就是不同的天神有他们不同的责任，但是等于就是我们必须要了解，就是任何时候我们做任何事情都有人在看着我们，所以这个叫头上的三尺有神明。那这个在佛法里面也是这么讲的。
Okay, so this is dispelling potential problems. This kind of protector does set scenarios for us to undergo the retribution, but they can also, depending upon what we do, I talked to you about the mind before, during, and after. If we have a change of mind, if we do something and we're sorry, it changes the weight of the karma we have to undergo. So they can also help with that. They can help something big become small and something small disappear. But it's from our own mind that it happens. They can make the karmic scenario be less because we're sorry. After we did it, we're sorry. So that's what I like about Buddhism, is there's always a chance to change. There's always a choice, and nothing is fixed.
那下一句是陀罗尼不明见，这句话的意思就是说，这个寄颂是我今归命大宗持，煎熬地善不实施，能除一切灾害难，修正无上道心知。
So this is the earth spirit line, and it says, I now take refuge with the great Dharani. The earth spirit, firm and stable, never misses his chant. He dispels calamity, harm, and adversities, so one can quickly attain non-production and the straight mind of the way. So the earth spirit is another kind of protector.
那这句话陀罗尼不明见，就是它有一个意思，就是大种词的意思，有一个就是监牢地神的名字的意思。
This talks about the earth spirit. So in the Agama Sutras, those are shared with the Theravada. The Theravada and the Mahayana share those sutras. And the Buddha said in the Agama, he talked about the earth spirit. And he told the earth spirit to come and listen to his teachings, but the earth spirit was arrogant. And he said, in the whole universe, I, the earth spirit, am the only spirit. There aren't any other spirits. And the Buddha said to him, no, there are other spirits. You're not the only kind of spirit there is. There are many kinds of earth spirits. There are many. And there's water spirits and fire spirits and wind spirits. But the earth spirit didn't like the answer because he was arrogant. And he said, how come there are other spirits? Everything is supported by the earth. They have no right to be called spirits. And the Buddha then talked about what water spirits do, what fire spirits do, what wind spirits do, and persuaded the earth spirit that he had lots of brothers and there were more than one kind of spirit, and then he wasn't so arrogant anymore. We in Buddhism, when we, for instance, we want to cut down a tree, we'll put a little sign on the tree and we'll say, all you spirits who live in this tree or use this tree, you need to know we're going to cut this tree. We need it, or we need the wood, or we need the space. So, and then we leave it there for a couple weeks, and then the spirits have a chance to change their home. And then the master, when he did it at the city, not only did he put the sign up, and then when the tree got cut, he would always tell them, you leave some of the logs. You know, they cut the trunk so they were like little stools you could sit on. And when he had to cut a tree, then he would tell them, you leave those there in case the spirits haven't moved yet. They'll have a place until time for them to move.
那这个就是说，释迦牟尼佛在阿含经里面有解释，他说这个世界上不只是有这些天神啊，什么火神、风神，就是还有地神。那地神也包括了很多。那当然，我们就是在佛教里面，我们讲还有树神呢。所以在佛教里面讲，就是像我们的在万佛城，如果你要砍树，那我们之前就会在可能几个礼拜前，或者甚至于几个月前，我们就会挂一个牌子，就上面会写的很清楚，说我们是什么原因我们要砍这个树啊，希望在这棵树上住的这些神，你能够赶快搬家。那藏人那时候都会跟弟子们讲说，那你们砍树的时候不要整棵树砍光光，你不要连那个根都拿，你至少要有一个小树干，那就是以防就是有一些这些树神啊，他们
慢吞吞还没有搬家，
没有搬家的话，还有一个地方可以让他栖息。
It happens with little things too. I remember Rosalind Kong is a very sincere disciple, and she lives in Singapore in a very high-end apartment. But when she went back to Singapore recently, there were termites in her apartment. She was shocked, so she called the guys in, and they said, well, we have to fumigate. But she's a very devout Buddhist, and she didn't want to kill anything, so she didn't want to fumigate these termites. And they said, there's no other way. You're in an apartment building, you know, if you don't fumigate, then all the other apartments are going to get termites. So they set the date. But she was really, she's a very sincere lady. She was very determined. So she put up a sign. It said, on such and such a day, if you're not out of here, you know, you're dead. So get out of here. And then not only did she put up the sign, but she recited the Great Compassion Mantra, which we recited today here in this house. And so in addition to telling him, she also recited the mantra. And when the termite guy came, no termites. And he said, how can that be? I was here myself. I saw them. So it works for little things too.
那下一句就是
Is that 下一句？
这句讲完了，下一句。
245. Yep. Okay.
那这一句是波切波多佛业。那上人在讲说，这一句跟上一句是连着的，就是说这两句其实是一句，他只是把它拆开来解释，所以也是除一切灾难的作用。那这个除灾难就是不知不觉中有什么毒也能够化解了他就是在讲那个居士吃到那个毒菇了，就是用这个咒的力量。那这个其实咒本身当然是有力量，可是你持咒，你本身就是你也有那个道德，你有道德的力量，你持咒才真正这个咒能够有作用。
Okay, so there's no verse for this line because the line before it and this line go together. That's why we don't see a verse here. Hey, Maggie.
或解波多佛业，那这句句诵就是金银砂石土木毒，
松弛神咒变甘露，能受最上金刚气，菩萨为何得故。This is poison. There is poison in gold, in silver, in sand, in rocks, in wood, in earth. But if one recites the spiritual mantra, they turn into sweet dew. One receives a supreme Vajra prediction, and the bodhisattvas will be one's friend, and virtue is not isolated. So this is a line about poison also. So it's general, this one. Poison is included, but you saw I listed all kinds of things where there could be toxic substances, which we know is happening in this day and age. The air, the water, the earth, because of factory farming and all these things, we have it. So this is a line that helps in general with when things are becoming polluted. And there's Shifu with Sweet Dew. The master painted these self-portraits himself, and this is the 41st hand of the 42 hands, and it's a picture of Sweet Dew. And all the pictures he painted before that, there wasn't any water there. He wasn't levitating on water. He was sitting on a lotus. But on this one, suddenly he's doing his Sweet Dew, and the water has now he's now sitting on water.
这些图都是上人自己画的，就是他当时画那个42手指眼的时候，每一个手眼他都画这样的一个图。那你看那个像也是很像是上人的自画像。那这一句是乌陀迦婆多婆耶，那这句的意思是于显如仪妙难言，大气有法是永全，本是因缘度其中，其性高照解道玄。
Okay, so the verse has several different meanings and also the function of the line. It says, one emerges unscathed from danger. It's wonderful beyond words. The great rare Dharma flows like a bubbling spring. Past lives events, causes and conditions, and interjected verses, a lucky star shines on high, relieving those who are hanging upside down. Hanging upside down refers to those who are undergoing a retribution that we consider to be a hell. It might be in a place called hell. They also might be anywhere where you see someone in this world suffering and it looks like they're in hell. So, again, this is a general line.
那这一句的意思就是除这个险阻难，险阻难，你可以讲就是任何的一种困难啊、阻碍啊，它都可以帮你消除。 那下一句是那色檀茶婆也，那这一句你大概可以看得到，就是除这个毒蛇，来我们一起念。
毒蛇人厌血咬害人，保治康复非灾殃。占路占空土无上极乐场。So this, the first line tells us what this line does. A bite from a poisonous snake, a viper, or a scorpion is quite harmful. The jeweled staff subdues such beings, and one is spared misfortune. Sweet dew moistens the hordes of Fujie ghosts, so they can stop getting reborn and go to the realm of ultimate bliss. So this is Erstor with his staff, and the second line talks about the staff. Erstor's staff has 9 rings, and when he shakes it, stamps it, and the rings ring, the gates of hell open up, and beings in the hells can be released. That's the kind of virtue Erstor has. He has that kind of virtue because he said, I won't become a Buddha, I'll stay a Bodhisattva until the hells are empty. But it will be very hard because of the kind of karma we create for the hells to ever be empty. So he stays, and he stays, and he stays, and he helps beings that are in the hell. So in his other hand is the wishing pearl. So on the one hand, he beats his staff to open up the gates of hell so beings can be released, and he gives them the as you will pearl, you can wish for what you want.
因为他这旁边你看到这个地藏王菩萨这个像，因为地藏王菩萨我们看到地藏王菩萨都会看到他拿的这个西藏，那他拿这个西藏本身就是他的一种法器，这个西藏这个法器就是这样，就是像如果说你走在路上，他这个铃，这个西藏上面有这个铃。这个铃在这样响的时候，就是说让你在走路的时候，如果有虫子啊有什么在路上，他们会因为听到这个声音，它跑掉，那让你不要去伤害他们，有这个作用。
I remember when I was in Seattle, I was the manager there for a period of time, and we were having an Emperor Liang repentance, and the master was ill. In fact, before I went to Seattle, he told me, you go to Seattle, and if I get sick, don't come back because you have a job to do there. 所以我记得有一次我在西雅图，我当家我们有一个那个梁皇唱的法会，那我没有去西雅图之前，师父派我去西雅图。他说，如果你听到我入医院或者有什么不如意的，你不要回来，因为我现在派你有你的工作。So I knew that he wasn't well, and shortly after we got there, we got a call that he was sicker. But when we had the Emperor Liang repentance, I just thought, maybe I'll just call up Shifu and ask him if he'll come, because there were 4 people who wanted to do a special ceremony at lunchtime in which you need 5 monks and you need the Dharma instruments, 5 Dharma instruments. Each monk carries 1. And so I thought, gee, how can we possibly have this without the master there? And then the master speaks for the donors. He speaks a verse. So I thought, why not? I'll just call him and say, we have 4 donors and we'd love to have you come. Would you come? 所以因为那个时候有4个人要做一个商堂菜，商堂菜就是说他供养我们吃饭的时候他供养当时呢是比较隆重的一个仪式，所以必须要有5个比丘，那5个比丘都每一个比丘就拿一个法器。那如果有4个人要做，那师父不来怎么做啊？没有办法呢。所以我想就打给师父看他能不能来，所以我打。So I called him. I didn't know anything about him. except the phone call that said he was worse. I didn't know anything else he was doing. I was up in Seattle, you know. And he said, oh, okay, I guess I'll have to come because you probably know that I just went to Maryland in the east part of the United States. And so you're going to say, well, why, if I could go to Maryland, can't I come to Seattle? And I know you'll get jealous, he said, if I don't come, so I'll come. I was so shocked. I didn't even know. 所以他那个时候我打，他说好了，他叹气说好了，因为你大概知道我已经去那个 Maryland， 不知中文怎么讲，就是东部的一个 state。然后马里兰，然后他说我知道你的个性你都会妒忌，如果我去 Maryland 呢，也不去你们的西雅图，所以 OK， 我回来。So he came. I was shocked because I didn't know about Maryland. But anyway, he came, but he was very sick. So they had to carry him in, at that time. And the monks came. He brought 4 monks plus himself, and I think they drove. Anyway, they came all the way to Seattle, which is about 18 hours if you're driving from San Francisco. And they got ready for the ceremony. Well, the Dharma instruments are a rui. It's shaped like this, a rui. And you hold it, It's usually made out of jade. And the white whisk, the brush, and what else? 2 more, can't remember. And Sherpa, the host, carries the staff. And in the middle of the ceremony, he bangs the staff to open up the gates of hell, right? They forgot the staff. The monks forgot the staff. So they had 4 monks, 4 beautiful instruments, and Sherpa didn't have a staff. 所以那个时候，来的时候，师父已经生重病，所以他把他带进来，他没有走路进来。然后那法器有4个法器，有4个比丘，但是比丘就忘记把这个西藏带来。那本来师父做主必须要有那个西藏咚咚咚所以师父就给我说，国修，你去找一个你们有没有？我们没有，我们没有那个东西。有的那个分部，它会有一个西藏在那边，我们没有。师父说没有怎么办呢？那你想办法。所以我去找。So师父 called me over and he said, Guoshu, do you have one of these in your Seattle Gold Summit, it was called? Do you have one of those? Well, we didn't have one of those. He said, okay, well, you got to think of something because I got nothing. So I found a broom handle. And I brought it to him, and he said, okay, that'll work. So here's this broom handle. Not even a broom, just the broom handle, Well, I'm telling you, Shifu is amazing. He looked like, lots of times he looked like an emperor. And that day I was standing beside him, I was translating or something, and he's there, and they have all these beautiful, instruments, and he's got this broom handle. And he looked like a bodhisattva, and I tell you, I'm sure that broom handle, he bump, bump, bump on the broom handle, and I think it opened the gates of hell. So his way was incredible. He could make us see that as a most majestic 西藏, 所以我给他一个扫把的扫把，但是没有扫把就是木杆。然后他说可以呀，所以那4个比丘都有那个很美丽的、很庄严的那个法器。那师父有一个扫把木板，木什么？
扫把的
杆。但是呢，师父他的威风是真的不得了，所以那一天他用那个，就好像我们都认为大概那个 那个地狱的门呢，开得很大那一天，因为虽然他就有这个东西，但是他，我记得我以前也是给他翻译，我坐在旁边，他坐在这里，在万福城，有时候我翻译，我就稍微偷偷看呢，有的时候他像一个皇帝呀，他本来没有这个叫什么？没有。你看起来那天有啊you know so he was amazing how he could move you to because of his dignity and because of his awesomeness. I remember at the city I would translate for him. Sometimes I'd look around at him and he would appear to be an emperor or appear to be someone extraordinary. And sometimes, you know, he'd have a little mustache. He didn't wear a mustache, but you'd look and there was a mustache, you know. So he was amazing what he could do. Why is that there? What are we doing? Where did the birds come from? Oh, screensaver. Okay. I talked too long.
刚刚那一句是除毒蛇难，那这一句那些佛业，就是你可以看到，就是可能跟龙有关系，就除这个毒龙难，是不是？句首应该是
Yep.
那个句诵
Sorry.
江河湖海
水长流，里海相关无数收。龙与星河主宰难，化作机上传万修。So this is subdues poisonous dragons, and you say, what's that have to do with this day and age? Well, we'll tell you. The water of streams and rivers and lakes and seas flow in definite courses. There is potential for benefit or harm. The 5 grains can flourish. Catastrophes caused by dragons, sharks, whales, crocodiles, and such can change to auspiciousness that prevails for myriad autumns.
所以这个那些佛业这一句咒，它虽然是讲说是除这个毒龙难，但是其实就是大海里面那些比较凶恶的那种大鱼啊、金鱼啊、鳄鱼啊，也都可以降服它们。
So dragons, when they procreate, when they want to have babies, they have to come back as snakes. So when they want to mate, they are snakes. And after they mate, they can go back to being dragons because dragons are transformation born. We are womb born. And then there are moisture born, like the things that grow in rice, the little bugs that grow in rice, that's moisture born. And then there is egg born, like chickens. And there is water born. So this one is transformation born. Sort of like metamorphosis of the caterpillar to the butterfly. So with the dragon, we think there aren't dragons, maybe. A lot of people will call this a myth or folklore. But in fact, the dragon, when he's among us, is a snake because he's come here to mate. There are dragons in the water. There are dragons in the sky. There are dragons that are on earth. And so, I mean, dragons bring rain and also can keep rain from happening. And so you pray to the dragons if you want rain or if there's too much rain. Well, I don't know. I'm a college graduate, you know, and I'm PhD, and yet I believe in dragons. I'm a Westerner too, but I believe in dragons.
那刚刚就在讲说，我们讲的自生就是吃软开化，就是有4种怎样去生。那龙的话，因为它是化身，所以就是它会变化的。有的时候，像我们现在我们没有办法看到龙，但是有的时候，也许你看到一条蛇的时候，你不要以为它只是一条蛇，有可能它是龙化身的，是龙化的。那这边是讲到那个龙的一个寄送，宜修快度，
助龙王，国旺 爬到挥三宝护身体，心住着卧用安康。So yeah, you tell the story. I'll translate it. You know who they are?
你现在在这个是讲
吉秀快度，你知道是谁？
这里是讲在讲到一个人说吉秀快度。
No， 吉秀快度是师父有一些龙在大陆的时候。
果顺那个故事。是在讲果顺的故事。果顺那个龙。
好，你讲，我翻译你。
那龙它就是有一些特色，就是龙它本身就是，其实龙它也在修行的，它修行非常的勇猛，但是它就是有一个缺点，就是它不直接，所以常常上人会提到这个，就是说如果一个修行人非常的精进，非常的勇猛，但是他如果不直接，将来就有可能堕落变成龙。
So what it is about dragons is they're miraculous because they're transformation born. And so they can appear and disappear, they can be big and small, they have lots of spiritual power. But they're in an animal body, which is very suffering. And that's because when they cultivated, they were really smart, but they didn't hold to the discipline, they didn't hold the precepts. And so when they became their next life, because they were really clever, really smart, they became dragons who had powers, but because they didn't hold the precepts, they had to have an animal body.
那在这个介绍里面，你看到吉修、快度、国王、法大，都是皈依上人的龙弟子，都是龙。
Yes, anytime the master takes a disciple that isn't human, in recent times, he would use the first name Fa, like we have Jin or we have Hung. So, some entity that wasn't visible to us would become Fa. So Fa Da, he would often name them Fa Da. And the dragons, he was at a place where there was a drought, and the dragons found him and wanted to take refuge with him, and he said, I won't give you refuge unless you make it rain. And they did, and so then he took these dragons. And like when we went to Taiwan to start a Buddhist academy back in 1989, the master gave us a little plaque with the name of the dragon, one of the dragons that took refuge with him. And he had us take it with us and put it there in our monastery, so we had a protector.
上人其实他有讲过，他说他在每一个道场，他都派他的龙弟子去保护那个道场，所以其实应该是每一个分支道场都有一条龙在保护那个道场。
要不要讲这个？
那这个在讲那个就是除毒蛇难的那个解释啦。那你说毒蛇啊、蛇蝎啊、百步蛇或者蝎子，因为它本身很毒嘛，大家都会就是你被它咬到，你可能就中毒，然后可能就是死掉了。可是因为内言咒有这一句，它专门就在除这个毒蛇难，除这些蛇蝎的难，所以他说就像药王树一样，专门解一切的毒，所有的毒都可以解除。那结在这里是在讲鬼。
哦，结不是复结 ，It's wrong. It's wrong in English. 那字不读复是读结吗？
如果是我们看过这个字是念结，但是那也是后面。
Okay, go ahead.
那这里讲的是一种鬼，就是这种鬼是非常很坏的、很厉害、很贪心的这种鬼。那这种鬼也是一种毒蛇鬼，他们也会放毒的。所以在这边讲的就是一种鬼叫做毒蛇鬼。那他们就是有些地方他去过的地方，这种鬼他就会放出一种很腥臭的味道。那就像其实有些人有些经验，他到了某个地方，他就闻到特别腥臭那种味道，有可能就是那种鬼的众生在那个地方。
So the two characters, I have it down as Fujie. She pronounced it Jie. So I don't know how those two first characters are pronounced. But anyway, you can see by reading what they're about. When I went to take the precepts in Taiwan, at one point, there were 5 of us who took precepts in Taiwan. And at one point, one of us was being a little bit naughty, not quite following the rules. It wasn't me that time. And we were in a guest, like a parlor in the monastery where they entertained guests. And there was people talking to us. And all of a sudden, I got this. I smelled this. And I knew something was wrong with somebody in that room. If you've ever had it happen, you'll know what it's like. It's really, really something.
那这一句是毗跳达婆耶，那下一个在讲这个闪电，是闪电的难，除闪电难。
I know， 怎么办？
快完了，对不对？
快完了。
然后把那个记诵念一下：方广天寿善调伏，蓄雷轰烈猛毒，冰雹闪电成灾害，金刚界神救护。
Okay, so this line is Pitao Dampoye, broad and expansive, heavenly transmission, and well subdued. Those are all meanings of the line. Thunder and wind are violent poisons. Hail and lightning create disasters and harm. But Vajra precept spirits rescue the innocent. So this line has to do with storms and lightning strikes. That's Katrina, a picture of Katrina. We're running out of time, so we're going fast now. Everything speeded up.
这一句苏波那诺婆耶，然后来我们念一下那个几首。
金翅鸟看妙莲花，接拓树叶恒河沙，鸡公嘴的受般若，圆满菩提长回家。Avoid the difficulty of the golden-winged pung bird. That's sort of like the phoenix. Embrace the wonderful lotus flower. If you can release, it can release you from your past karmic deeds, numbering like Ganges sands. Accumulate merit, amass virtue. You should cultivate prajna and perfect bodhi, so that you can go home soon.
所以这句就是除金翅鸟难。那除金翅鸟，我们在想，现在这个世界上哪有金翅鸟？当然是有，可是我们看不到，因为金翅鸟非常非常的大，就像须弥山那么的大，我们看不到。但是除了金翅鸟难之外，其实它也包括一些的那些凶恶的那些鸟类，就像老鹰啊，它会去欺负那些小的动物一样，就是这些恶鸟都可以包含在里面。
So the golden-winged hummingbird is very, very big, and every day we feed it at lunchtime. We put out a little bit of rice so that the pungbird can have something to eat. And you know what? The rice always disappears. It does. So, but in addition to that bird, which we can't see, normal people can't see, there are many birds that are vicious in the world and violent. And so this line can also help subdue them. Now this is...
这16句就是从拉舍婆耶到这个最后一句是波那诺婆耶，就是除一切灾难。所以我觉得你们今天如果有机会学到，我觉得是非常非常好的机会。你可以常常去念这16句，可以帮助这个社会，帮助这个国家，帮助很多地方的灾难，降服他们。
So this part of the mantra is particularly about how to quell certain disasters, and so we've seen 16 of them. And Jinfu Shi's encouragement to you all is, since you heard this tonight and you now know about these lines, you can recite them, you can chant them from time to time, and it will help. Because you remember one of the lines earlier said, don't assume that if you only do it that it's not going to help, because it will. So try it out and help the world. Do you want to answer questions, or are we done? 已经9点了，要听吗？要不 answer Why don't you answer the Shurangama question? Where is it?
关于研究的问题吗
？Are they gone already? Everybody gone? Offline?
No, they're all here.
Okay.
We can do that.
Yeah, I bet they are. No questions. Wonderful.
有人念过那研究吗？没有。
No.
We have something in Joe there, so we can take it.
Good. Good. The mantra is 554 lines long. 554句。那我们今天听16句。Maggie, you gonna memorize? Oh, she knows her name. She looked right up. You gonna learn the mantra? Good. You have one about mantra, Long and Joe. You should answer that one. Maybe that's enough. Oh no. Now we have to show ourselves. Okay, you have to get her in. Yeah, okay, good. You just did it. Did you find it? Number what? Number 3. Okay, answer that one. So, well, you read it to me and I'll translate it.
有一个人问说，给师父拜1万个头是就可以做他的弟子吗？还是说必须要给释迦牟尼佛拜1万个才行？到底要拜多少？
Okay, so the question is, if we were to bow 10,000 times to the Master, does that count as for being his disciple? Or is it the case that we're supposed to bow 10,000 times to Shakyamuni Buddha? In general, how many times is it? You answer, I'll translate.
以前我们早期皈依上人的时候，上人并没有这么规定我们。但是从不知道从哪一年开始，上人就开始规定了，就是所有皈依他的弟子，你必须要拜1万拜。
So when we started, in the early days when we became the Master's disciples, there was no such instruction about bowing 10,000 bows. But somewhere along the line, he began to say, if you want to be my disciple, then in order to complete the process, you have to bow 10,000 times.
那当然，上人有他的用意，他就是说，希望弟子们能够拜佛，然后能消了你的业障，消了业障，你就会开智慧。那这个居士他问的问题是说，是不是只有拜1万拜就可以变成上人的弟子？
Okay, so the reasons, of course, were many for this, and one of the reasons was that we could get rid of our karmic obstacles and open our wisdom by bowing. That's what bowing does, those two things. So now the question is, if we were to bow 10,000 bows, would that count as being the Master's disciple?
我们的回答当然是不行，你还是要经过这个皈依，你一定要皈依，然后才能够正式成为现在万佛前座下这个僧团的弟子。当然，你现在皈依已经因为上人已经不在，就不再是成为上人的弟子，而成为上人座下僧团的弟子。
So there has to be, no, it's not enough to just bow 10,000 bows to Shakyamuni Buddha or to the Master. You must go through, in order to formally become a disciple of the Buddha, there's a little ceremony you have to go through. So you have to have that ceremony. Now, of course, now the Master isn't here in the world right now, so we can't take that ceremony from the master. But what happened after the master left in 1995 is we got together and we decided that the monks would represent the master in giving people refuge, so they would become disciples, but not disciples of any one of Shifu's monastic disciples. They would become disciples of the tradition that Shifu left us. So that's how they do it. The monks will transmit the 3 refuges, but it's in the tradition of the master.
那当然，上人还在的时候，其实很多人就有问过这样的问题，就是说我到底我平常在拜佛，我可不可以就像拜3拜，我就扣掉这3拜，或者我是去朝山的时候，可不可以把朝山拜的这些拜也把它扣除？上人说要你拜1万拜，你还能扣3扣4的。他说你就是要用一个诚心来拜佛，然后来消你的业障。所以如果现在你参加了这个法种举行的这个皈依仪式，这些主法的这些法师们，他还是会要求你们在皈依之后还是要拜1万拜。
So it used to be when people would hear they had to do the 10,000 vows, they'd try to strike a bargain, get a deal. They'd say, well, if I go on a pilgrimage and I bow up the mountain, I bow 35 times, can I subtract that from the 10,000? Or every morning when I get up and bow to the Buddha, those 9 bows or 3 bows, can I subtract them? And the master would always say, you know, you're making a deal, and there's no deal here. So the case is still the case that if you want to take refuge in the tradition of the master and you have that opportunity, that whatever monk gives you that refuge will tell you, you also have to bow the 10,000 bows to complete the ceremony.
这边有一个居士在问一个问题，他说在他的周围没有法师，也没有寺庙的这种条件之下，到底要该怎么样修才如法才受益呢？
So the question is, if I don't have a monastery near me, if there are no monastics near me, how do I handle that? How do I practice?
那我想问这个问题的居士，就是表示说他是有在用这个online，他有这个用电脑。那我想第一步当然也就是从我们法种的这些网站里面，你可以看到上人解释这个内明咒跟内明经的这些经文，你可以从那边先下手。那在上人在解释这些经典的时候，尤其解释到内明经、内明咒的时候，他特别强调一点，就是你必须要持戒。你在修习内眼法门、修习内眼咒的时候，你必须也要持戒。如果你不持戒，然后想要修习这个法门，你其实没有办法真正得到法益。
Okay, so the answer is, since you wrote your question online, it's obvious that you use a computer. So if you use a computer, you can go to our websites, and in the Chinese website, you will find the Shurangama mantra, the Shurangama sutra, and the master's explanation, plus a lot more sutras. And so, and you will learn when you go there and you read those that the other criteria is that you have to have ethical conduct. You have to hold the precepts. You have to not kill, not steal, and so forth. If you don't do that and you think you want to practice, it won't work. So on the one hand, you have to be moral, and on the other hand, you can find lots of material online.
今天晚上因为就是针对这个特别问到这个内明咒这个问题，我们回答，时间已经到了，我们今天晚上就到这里。
Okay, so we've answered a couple of questions that had to do with the Shurangama and the mantra, and so our time is. 还有两个问题。
The questions are not answered from Dharma. I'll share the question. May I read it? The first question is, how can we help prevent the war in the Middle East? Can our reciting of the Shurangama mantra help?
Okay, 你放那种先复述。 我们怎么可以比年中东的？It's some more stuff happening today. I haven't told you. So 你放中文。
怎么样能够免除这个中东的这个灾难的？
然后他问，如果练能研究，会不会有所帮助？
那练研究能不能有帮助呢？我们当然要说绝对可以有帮助，因为刚刚就已经讲到了嘛，这个16句里面就有除这个刀兵劫，就除这个战争的。
So of course the answer is going to be yes, because as you've just heard in these lines, there are lines in the mantra that help to quell disasters and quell war. So of course we're going to say yes, it would help.
So the second question is, what will happen if we chant Shurangama mantra and we are not vegetarian?
你翻译中文。
他是说，如果他没有吃斋，他还没有没有办法完全吃素的话，那念内营咒，可以吗？
会有什么结果？会有什么结果？
会有什么结果？我没有办法告诉你有什么结果，但是就是像我们刚刚讲的，就是如果你真的要持咒，你要念咒，让这个咒真的发生作用，你一定要跟我持戒。
So the answer from Jinfu Shi is I can't really tell you what might happen, but I will say that if you really truly want the mantra to work, then you need to not eat meat. 我可以解释，就是说那个咒文，我们所看到的经文还有很多，就是它会引一些五行中的护法来。我们念那个咒，诚信的话，那护法会来，因为好像叫他们来。如果你叫他们来，然后他来，你整个身体就是肉的味道，或者葱的味道，他不高兴，因为在一方面你叫他们，在一方面愁的不得了，他不要。这是师父讲的，不是我讲的，这师父是这样解释。所以呀，最好你要他们来，那你自己要干干净净的，他来他也不会讨厌。So I can answer this much from what Master said, was that we know, even from tonight, the lines that one of the functions of these lines is to bring in invisible protectors, spirits, bodhisattvas. We call them with the line. And even if we don't have a lot of gongfu, if we're sincere, then the line works. And if the line works and that protector comes, and then we smell like fish or meat or onions or garlic, then they don't like that smell. And so it becomes a catch-22. On the one hand, they come. On the other hand, they don't want to be here. And so you've asked for protection or help from them. On the other hand, they don't want to help you because you smell bad. So that's one of the reasons that it's better to become a vegetarian if you want to sincerely recite the mantra. But that's okay. You recite the mantra, and it's okay if you eat meat. It's okay. Because either you'll get tired of it and won't do it because you don't have the merit, because you're killing at the same time you're reciting, or the mantra will help you stop eating meat. So either way, it's okay. You try it and see. 所以我说我自己会说，你吃肉你要念咒可以，因为你不念咒你吃肉啊，那很可惜。所以底下你吃肉跟念咒是比较好一点，有没有？并且呢，你如果吃肉你念咒，这可能因为你常常参与那个杀生的那个业， 可能你自己就不会有那个福报可以继续念咒，这个是自然而然，你就听着不念。或者呢，你念咒，那个咒的力量就令你少吃肉。
在楞严经的卷七，如果你们有兴趣，你们可以去看一下，在卷七里面有特别提到楞严咒的它的利益，讲得非常非常清楚。其中楞严咒有一个最大的一个利益，就是你没有办法持戒的人，他因为你持这个咒，慢慢的你就能够持戒。就像你没有办法断除这个肉啊或者五辛，那你一直觉得你非常困难去持这个吃素啊，持这个斋戒，那对你来讲这是最大的困难。可是因为经过你去持楞严咒的时候，因为这个咒的力量会帮助你有一天你也能够持这个斋戒。
Finish? Any more questions? Oh, okay.
我就想问是什么？它算不算是一种慢？
什么？
是，你去的不算一种慢。
Death?
Yeah.
Yes. Death is a difficulty. And it's you ask, is it算不算一种难? Yes, it is. It's difficulty. We all have that one. And what is death? Okay. 你翻译中文？你会中文吗？你讲。
那是什么？它算不算是一种慢？
然后你第三个问题是死是什么 ？OK。死 is the cutting off of breath. When the breath is cut off, you die. You can no longer sustain this body. And when you die, the last thing that goes out is your灵魂, your soul leaves last. And when the soul is gone, then that's called death. 你翻译给我。
对，就是你这个生命结束了，但是我们生命结束了，并不表示你是完完全全的所有的都死去了。你这个肉身是死了，是没了，但是你这个识，就是这个第八意识这个识还在。当你在下一次去轮回的时候，这个识就会到你下一次你要投胎的这个对象里面，它会先到那个身体里面去，所以你第二次的生命。
So then Jinfu adds that death is the end of the physical body, but it's not the end of us, because the eighth consciousness, which we call the soul, transmigrates to some other body or some other realm. Sometimes we get a body, sometimes we're in a realm where you don't have a body. But in general, we move on. So death is not the end of us. It's only the end of the physical body. 他第二个问题是什么？ is it a difficulty? 因为这个世界就是我们来到这个世界，有这个在，有那个难。那可能有的世界没有生死，但是这里有生死，所以是个难。
好，我们今天晚上就到这边。我们做回向。
Thank you for your attention. You're all very attentive. Even Maggie. Yeah.
OK， 你们不会唱就跟着听我们。
你是功德庄严佛净土，上报四重恩，下济三途苦。若有见闻者，悉发菩提心，尽此一报身，同生极乐国。